Interpreting parts of expressions and evaluating. Okay, so in this one, we need to understand the different English words so that we can convert them to math terminology. This first example says 17 minus the sum of 9 and 5. Okay, so when we were breaking this down, it's easier if we go one step at a time and reread it and then write it down as we were reading it and then reread it again. So I read it once. So now 17, well, that means 17 minus the sum. Sum means I'm going to add something together, and that's the sum of 9 and 5. So I have 17 minus the sum of 9 and 5. So 17 minus 9 plus 5, and that would be your final answer. Next one, the product of 5 and the difference of 8 and 3. Okay, so product means multiply, and 5, and the difference means subtract of 8 and 3. Okay, so we need to break this down carefully. So the product of 5 and something. So 5 times something. And that something is the difference of 8 and 3. So we have 5 times 8 minus 3. Final answer. So just make sure you break it down and reread it and make sure that it seems to make sense. Now, for these next examples, what we want to do is use our order of operations to evaluate or simplify the expressions. We're going to make it as simple as we can and try to get a number answer. So we're going to put in 3 for x, 8 for y. So x times y minus the quantity x squared plus 7. So that would be 3 times my y is 8 minus x squared, which would be 3 squared plus 7. Okay, so all I did was I put those numbers in where they're supposed to be. 3 times 8. Figure out what your 3 times 8 is, and that would be 24. Minus 3 squared is 9 plus 7. Don't forget those parentheses, just because of our order of operations. So we went into our parentheses, we simplified everything out. So now my parentheses says 9 plus 7. 9 plus 7 is 16. So I have 24 minus 16. 24 minus 16 leaves you with 8. So your final answer is 8. And number 4 here, 3 times the quantity x divided by y minus y. So again, I'm going to start by putting in what I know. X is 3 over 8 minus y. Okay, so I have 3 times, oh, sorry, I should change that y to an 8, right? There we go. So 3 times 3 over 8, so I multiply straight across. This is multiplying fractions. 3 times 3 is 9. 1 times 8 is 8 minus 8. Well, this is going to be a kind of a tricky one to do. I could type it in my calculator, but I can also just change this to a denominator of 8, so then I can subtract. I need to have a common denominator in the when I'm adding or subtracting. So I have 9 over 8 minus, and then if I want to make this an 8 on the bottom, I multiplied 1 times 8. So I need to multiply times 8 on the top. 8 times 8 is 64. So I'm going to take 9 minus 64. And that will give me a negative 55 over 8, because then we would just write 9 minus 64 over 8. So that is your final answer. And it should be written as a fraction. And finally, our final examples are going to be to understand the terminology of what goes into expressions and how we put them together. So that would be how many terms there are, what the degree is, the LC, that is the leading coefficient, and then our classification like monomial, binomial, or trinomial, and it could go on. So those are the possibilities for the classifications, and then we simplify. When I say simplify, it means we put them in the correct order. Alright, so the first one, we have negative 5x squared plus 7x cubed. Well, the number of terms are the number of things that are separated by plus or minus signs. So we have negative 5x squared, and then we are separated by a plus sign, 7x cubed. So that means there are 2 terms. So A, the answer is 2. Alright, so for B, what is the degree? Well, the degree is the biggest exponent. Okay, so we have exponents of 2 and 3. Well, 3 is obviously bigger than 2, so that means that my degree is 3. C, what is the leading coefficient? Well, once we know what the degree is, then we're going to look at that term, and the leading coefficient will be the number before that variable. So it's 7, because 7 is the number that's before the variable of the biggest one. So 7 is my leading coefficient. The next one, what is the best classification? Classification goes back to how many terms there are. So there were 2 terms, so the prefix bi means 2, so that must mean that this is a binomial, because there are 2 terms. And finally, E, put it in the proper order. Well, the proper order is biggest to smallest as far as exponents go. And then if there is no variable, then that's the last thing. Okay, so my first term is going to be 7x cubed, because that is my biggest exponent, minus 5x squared. So that is your simplified form. Alright, the next one. First thing is we need to find the number of terms. 1, 2, 3. 3 terms. Second part, we need to find what the degree is. So we're going to look for the biggest exponent, which is 4. So that means that my degree is 4, because 4 is bigger than 2 or 1, which is what the x would be. For part C, what is the leading coefficient? So the leading coefficient, again, we're going to be looking at our term that has that biggest number in the exponent. Now the number before that is actually negative 18. Don't forget the negative sign, because remember, it's like saying plus and negative. So our leading coefficient is negative 18. It won't be correct if you forget that negative, so make sure you're careful on that. Part D, we are looking at classification. So we're looking back at the terms, 1, 2, 3 terms. Tri means 3, so this must be a trinomial. Alright, and finally E, simplify. Okay, so we just put them in order, biggest to smallest. So we have exponent of 4, exponent of 2, exponent of 1. So we're going to put them in that order. So we have negative 18. Again, careful of your negative signs. X to the 4th plus, okay, so the next biggest one is the 2. So 12x squared plus 4x. And that would be your final answer. So those are your notes over interpreting parts of expressions and evaluating them. Go through the practice problems, and then you should be prepared for your quiz over this material.